Welcome to Authors in Espresso. I'm your host, Nadia Gilks, and today we are here with a real treat. We have a guest today who is a professional inspiration and a source of encouragement. So I know that we will get a lot from her today. Dr. Otito Iwuchukwu is a Renaissance woman in the truest sense, a published author, organizational psychologist, seasoned editor with over a decade of experience, and the founder of Get Fab Editing, where she brings out the best in writers' voices and helps them connect with their readers with clarity, confidence, and impact. She's also an academic, a certified talent development professional, a cultural intelligence facilitator, an avid bibliophile, a passionate cook with YouTube videos, and the author of The Belonging Paradox, a compelling exploration of what it means to belong without losing yourself. On today's episode, we'll dive into her editing journey, the power of words, the psychology of belonging, and how her many passions inform her work and worldview. Dr. Otito, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. Oh my God. I was like, is that me she's talking about?
That's
I don't
all
know.
you, and then some. I can't welcome you for 30 minutes because then they would stop
Yeah,
listening. But I
yeah,
for sure could welcome you for 30 minutes because you do so much. I
yeah.
thought that I was the ultimate multi-hyphenate, but you go from like pharmacy, organizational psychology, writing, cooking, running, editing, training. So how do you take all of that to
Mhm.
design your dream life?
Okay. So, I get this question a lot, and I say to people, like, I'm not doing everything at the same time, right? So it's kind of when I have to do one thing, I mean, kind of focus on that and then, move to the next thing. But some things are kind of like the background hum. So, the writing is a background hum for me. And then the cooking, I think those are the two things. But all of the others, I use them as, I would say, as needed, right? In that sense. And so I think, when you talk about multi-hyphenate, I think that's what really helps me, because if I say to myself, I'm going to start this project, then I kind of, lock in, as the kids say now. I kind of focus on that and walk that through, right? So that's how I've been able to balance, for instance, the editing with my other roles, right, in life. Mm-hmm.
That's my issue, I think, is I wanna do everything at the same time. I wanna be able to split my day and say, "I'm gonna make quotes during this hour, I'm gonna podcast during this hour, consult, da, da, da," and I'm like, "Well, you have a real job that you have to go
Yeah.
to, so that's
Yep.
not really conducive." And everything seems to stay
Yeah.
humming in the
Yeah.
background for me all at once, so I think that's where I have to get to, is like, you're doing with this 1 or 2 things now,
Yes.
and then as you
Mm-hmm.
need something else, you pick it up. But there are so many people still waiting on, like, quotes from me, and I'm like, "Well, listen to my
Yeah.
podcast in the meantime." Now, you call yourself a Renaissance woman, so when you say that, what do you mean?
I think it's, to me, that's another way of talking about multi-hyphenates, right? So somebody who's interested in so many things and, just for the love of it, right? It's kind of like I would do all of these things that I do, even if I didn't get paid, right? I mean, some of them I'm not even getting paid for it, right? So I just kind of, pick this interest over time. I always say that it's almost like I'm drawn to them because there are certain things that I'm also not drawn to, right? I'm not drawn to video games or things like that. And so from that perspective, I think it's just the multiplicity of things that I do, right? You kind of listed it out. And, if you left me, I'll probably pick up something else again. But I know, no, no, no.
I know,
What
that's
I
what
love
I've been
is more than
saying. No
enough. Yeah.
no new
Yeah.
ventures.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, when they are in their career, and you've had several careers that have been people's end goal. So how do you get comfortable with saying it's time for me to shift and then actually do it? Because some
Yeah.
people become a pharmacist and say, this is it. This is what I wanted to
Mm,
do, or a psychologist or a
yeah.
writer. And from the outside looking in, it doesn't seem like you've had an issue saying, I'm going to
Yeah.
transition now, and be
Yeah.
fearless in doing that. What gives you the
Yeah.
courage to transition?
I guess you would say that's the word, right? Courage. But I have to tell you, initially when I would move from one thing to the other, It used to bother me, and I use the word used very carefully, because I used to say to myself, like, it's like you're flaky, right? You're not staying in one thing, for long enough and all that. So then when I got into my academic role, I said to myself, you have to see this to the end, right? It's kind of like, something that I was telling myself, right, at the back of my mind, because like it or not, come year 3, year 4, that itch was there. It's like, I mean, I don't want to do this again. Not that I don't want to do this again, but I was looking for the next thing, right? In that sense. But then it's like you're kind of halfway through, right? In terms of, getting tenured and all. Why don't you see it through to the end, right? That's what I mean. In retrospect, I'm not sure that was the greatest idea, but it's also fine, right? In that sense. But I knew that if I was going to stay there, I had to find other things, right, to satisfy that. I'll call it an itch, right? And so that's when the cooking. So I've always loved to cook, and I'm like, what does it take to run a vlog? I'm running that on the weekends. Cooking just like you're doing, scheduling the videos, doing everything. And, it's funny because I did all the video editing myself at the time. I loved to do that. But as soon as the pandemic came, it's like, I don't even have a sense of where I'm going. So I'm going to take a break, right? So I took that break, and I haven't yet gone back to that, but I know it's going to come back. It's just not yet, because in that space of time was when I then finished up my program. And then after the program, then, I started doing the training and all. But you can see that all these things were going on while I had my regular job. And I think that's what I would say sustained me. Because I'm not a person who, does only one thing. I admire the specialists. I admire those who kind of, drill down and all. But I've always known, even when I was in grad school, that I'm more of a generalist. Like I kind of like to know a bit of things here and there, because I feel like it helps me when it's time to synthesize things, right? And that's the word I use, because I actually studied, I had a minor in medicinal chemistry, and I think about it as you're bringing all these products, all these reactants, right, to make this product. And so for me, yes, I stayed in one job on the surface, but beneath, I was doing so many other things, right? And I think that's what has, again, like I said, sustained me. I don't know any other way to explain it, right?
And in academia, what do you teach? Are you teaching pharmacy classes or what's your
Yes, I
specialty?
teach pharmacy classes. So, you know, I always say to people, and I learned this from a woman called Pamela Slim. She had a book way back then called Your Body of Work, right? I always say to people, like, if you look in your life, you're gonna see things that you can thread, like you can run a thread through it if you really pay attention, right? And you know I always use my brother sometimes as an example of that, because it's kind of like that's what makes it clearer, to people when I try to explain it. So when he was younger, he loved art. Like he could draw up anything. He was so good at it. He got like, honors. I mean, I guess it's in the genes because his son is doing that now. But you see, he left that and he read medicine, right? Became a doctor, but now he's an interventional cardiologist. So that fine art, that skill, right, of taking your time and being very, dexterous is kind of working out, in that field, right? So it's kind of the same thing, I would say, for me, in the sense that there's just a thread that runs through. And what do I mean by that? In pharmacy, I teach genetics, right? I teach the genetics of how drugs work, why you would take a drug and somebody else wouldn't take a drug. And the underpinning of that is the uniqueness, right? We're all different. Like we're the same, it's at 99%, but the 1% is what makes us different, like at the genetic level. And so I bring that into my work to say, you cannot be like any other person, right? So when I'm, coaching people, training people, I always say you have to look for your strengths. You have to look for that unique, fingerprints, I would say, that is you and you alone, right? You cannot walk another person's journey. And so doing that at the DNA level, right, is what I teach. But then outside, I do it on the external, where it's kind of like, what are your gifts? What is your own imprint that you can make, right, in this life? So I kind of see it as, that's kind of, to me, the thread that runs for me. how do you belong to yourself, right? Knowing the gifts that you have and using them as is without having to look at another person, because whatever you have is whatever you have, right? So that's the way I see it. Yeah.
And is that the cornerstone of the belonging paradox, that
It is.
guiding people to
Yeah.
find that unique quality and talent within them?
And also, not being ashamed of it, right? Is kind of one of the things that I would say, because we get into environments, like I was saying, when I said I'm kind of envious of the people who can go deep down. I'm envious of them, but I don't want to be them. It's just a longing to say, oh, I wish I could. I wish I
I
could.
wish I knew that one thing, that path, that crystal ball. What's
That
the
I
end?
could do,
What's the end look like?
But like it or not, they're probably looking at you and saying, how are you able to do all these things, right? So it's
Mhm.
it's different. I mean, so, I could envy them, all that, but I know I can never be that person. It's like if you have, the genes, for instance, right, for being tall, that's what you have. You cannot, you know, decrease your height or increase your height, right? You have to be confident in that and say, this is who I am and this is how I come into the room, no matter what other people say, because I find that I'm bicultural, right? So I find that having come to the US, there's just a thing where people almost want to, put you in a place, put you in a box kind of thing. And, it used to bother me a lot at the beginning because, I wanted to fit in, right? But when I became a leader, when I started to enter into different rooms, I think is when it became very clear to me that, nah, I don't want to fit in. If this is what it takes to fit in, I don't want it. Like, I'm very clear about that, right? So, that's kind of, I took people through that journey on the different, life areas, and sometimes how people make you feel really, really bad, right? For certain things. And you start to wonder, is it me? And then it's not you. You're who you are. And then people just react to that. And we have to kind of, understand that, so that when next you enter into another room, you can say, oh, it's a reaction. It's not me. It's their reaction, right?
Yeah,
In that sense. Yeah.
because I think people are they want to be able to label you and put you in that box to know how to treat you and to, I guess, know what to expect from you. And then the conditioning on the other side is, when you're labeled this, that, or the other, this is how you act.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just wanting to authentically know each other and then respond accordingly or show your true self. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it's a bit of deprogramming that you're
Mm-hmm.
doing
It
with
is.
your
It
paradox
is.
as well.
Honestly, I think you're the person that has used this word, and that's what it is. It's a deprogramming because, I think about some of the experiences that I have in that book, and I had to come to the understanding that, as hard as it was to say, it's an in-group thing, right? It's an in-group, out-group thing. It's not like these people dislike me. They're just not used to me, They're just not used to somebody like me being in their circles, being in all of that. And I have to understand that and appreciate that, right? So I don't, it's almost like I don't hold it against them. It's kind of like I'm guileless now. But it took me a long time to get there, right? Because you really wonder, like, what is it? Why would they treat somebody one way and treat me another way? But when I started, doing the psychology and then researching for my book, I did a lot of social psychology, right? Reading about in groups, out groups. And that gave me such an understanding, right? I still almost, chuckle when I think about it, because I was like, all the time I wasted, not knowing these things. I want to save people that time, because, yeah, it's gonna happen. As long as we have a pluralistic society, you're gonna have in groups and out groups. So the earlier you kind of know, you know, I'm not in this in group, so I better get myself together, the better, right? In that sense. So yeah.
I love that because when you're selfless and you write a
Hmm.
book like this, that's the point. I don't want you to take as long to learn this lesson as I did, or I don't want you to make this mistake that I did. So here's a blueprint that worked for me that might help. So I love that because that just shows who you are as a person.
Yeah.
So do you use this as the launch pad to start a consulting business, or have you been consulting, or is this more for like
Yeah.
your keynote speech career?
Yes, so it's for consulting and keynote speech because, the framework that I built out of the work, I want to be able to present it, right? And the more I think about it, the more I think I need to go like multiple levels down to actually start like high school, like earlier in people's lives, as opposed to when people are kind of, grown. You know what I mean? Like, to me, like you said, it's also a launch pad, right, for speaking as well, which I really love to do, right? But I think the way that it's funny because I know people talk about, keynote speaking and all. I like more of the conversational. So like the fireside
Fireside
chats,
chats,
yeah,
yeah.
those kinds of things. That's my jam, right? In that sense. So yeah.
So what does working with you look like? Is it you going into, like, adopting a classroom or having a program in a high school, or do
having a
people do
program.
one-on-one?
Having a
Okay.
program. So yeah, so it's more of that's where the training part comes in, right? Being able to teach people the skills because, you know, let's look at something like empathy, which is one of my frame, one of the legs of the framework. It's something that can be taught, right? People think it's something you have or you don't have. It's a skill. You can actually learn
Oh,
it.
I didn't
And
know
you
that.
learn it constructively, right? You're not learning it just to say, oh, I'm empathetic. But it's like, what is known in the field as radical empathy. You're not just being empathetic for the fun of it. You're being empathetic for good. You know what I mean? Like you're taking that and you're, you know, deconstructing and reconstructing it so that it benefits everyone around you, right? It's not just, kind of feeling sorry for people, right? In that sense. So these are the things of trying to teach those skills. And it's interesting that we're going through all of this wave of anti-immigration because one of the things that I had started to do before, the new president came in was trying to go to the immigration, the organizations that kind of cater to immigrants to do this training even for free, right? Because that's the point, that immigration point is the point at which the lack of belonging is felt so much, right? I was very fortunate that I had my own siblings here before I came. So the shock wasn't as much. But
Mhm.
I've always had a thing for, you know, people who are coming into any space at all, which is again migration, right? It may not be from a country to another, but it may just be from, transitional spaces. You're moving from one space to the other. I've always just had a heart for them because I know how that feels, like to get into a place and you don't know, should I go left? Should I go right? What should I do? For a while, I was a coach for Speak Higher. It's an organization, and what they do is high school students, like people who come in, through the refugee system or they're seeking asylum. So you're kind of guiding them, And it was so to me at the time, so gratifying because you see these kids who couldn't even speak English, right? So I'm giving them the kind of advice that a high school counselor cannot give it to you because she has 600 students to cater to, right? So you're lost. That's the word. And I'm trying to make sure that they don't fall through the cracks, right? So that's kind of if you were to ask me what a passion project of mine is, it's exactly that. So people don't fall through the cracks because, knowledge is power, but putting the knowledge to action, right, is even more powerful in my
Yeah.
mind.
And so
Yeah.
you said that empathy is one of the pillars. What are
Mm-hmm.
the others?
So the other pillars are what I would call like orientation, right? And orientation is what I call belonging in place, knowing who you are in reference to the spaces that you're in, the spaces and the places that you're in, right? And recognizing that once you get that right, it's easy to then, you know, I would say what I call what's the word I'm looking for now? Like beam out belonging, right? Because I'm so secure in my space and my place that I can welcome other people in. I don't get shaken about by that. And then one of them is grace, right? Being able to offer people grace and all of that. And then boundaries, right? So yeah.
That's a tough one. Matter of fact, that word's kinda
Yeah.
triggering for a lot of people. A lot of people in
Okay.
12-step programs trying to learn boundaries.
Yes.
That
But
is
you
that
see, the way that I think about it, it's not the regular way of, oh, you know, draw a line, right? It's more to me, again, it's all about location because I look at belonging as a dynamic journey. Like you're always going to be, walking toward belonging wherever you are. It's for people to know that you don't need to be in certain spaces, right? Like it's an internal boundary, I'll put it that way, right? Because it's kind of like knowing exactly where you want to belong, right? And then looking for that as opposed to just letting, anything be.
this
You
is
know what
where
I
life
mean?
dropped me and let me make myself comfortable here, and it's not your
Yes.
space.
Or even looking for places that you're not supposed to be in. I don't know how to explain it. It's like, and I use an example to say, I should not go looking for belonging in a Harley Davidson club, for instance, right? Because they cannot offer it to me. You see what I'm saying? It has nothing to do with them. It has to do with me knowing where are the places that I need to be, right? If I want to be able to be affirmed in belonging. Because if I get into the right spaces, I'm going to keep butting up against that, lack of belonging. If I get into the wrong spaces, rather. So it's, teaching people how to turn it around. So it's not like you're not letting people in, is you not going in. It's you not even going in, giving yourself that boundary to say, I shouldn't be there. I don't want to be there, right? In that sense. So, yeah.
Yeah, I had to come to that realization in quite a few things.
Mhm.
Finally, I'm like, I'm just too old. I'm not doing this, that, and the third anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll just wait for
Yeah.
my right tribe to come along and be,
Yeah.
where I'm really
Mhm.
meant to be.
Because when you get that, right, there's no friction. It just
Right.
everything just works, right? And I also look at it as you can also offer that to people. You can be that space that people can come and, feel welcomed. So yeah, it's to me now, after writing my book, I tell people I don't want to be everywhere. I don't want to be friends with and I use the word everyone loosely. You know what I mean? Like before, I used to be a person who would be like, we can all get along, everything is wonderful. And, we're here, it's a multicultural society. But now it's like, no, it's
It's
not
so
as
funny because
multicultural.
I
Mhm.
hear you speak, and I'm in a lot of expat communities because
Yeah.
I've been looking at moving
Okay.
and just trying to emotionally prepare myself if I do make the
Yes.
move. I mean, it's such a big change to not have
Yeah.
either familiar
Yeah.
language or surroundings or whatever. And so I'll see people that are seeking like an expat community, whether it's
Mhm.
Americans or Black Americans or
Mhm.
what have you. And then over time, they realize like this isn't working, and if I was in the US in my comfort zone, I wouldn't even talk to this person. But because we're in this unique situation together, I'm just grabbing onto whoever I can. And that I think that's kind of a part of what you're saying is like
Yes,
when you know
it is.
yourself and you're carrying yourself with you, you're just not going to allow yourself to even entertain what
Mhm.
you know in your heart is not working for you, or you're not
Yep.
looking for things out of desperation.
Out of
You could be
desperation or
comfortable
out
to
of
wait.
feeling like you have to make it work, right? That was
Yeah.
my orientation. Oh, it has to work, we have to kind of get along. But now, like you said, look at it and say, in my country, this would never fly, right? So why am I almost like denigrating myself?
Yeah.
In
It's
order
funny
to
to
belong.
read. Make a great book for somebody, but I'm like, "Lord, I don't want that to be the experience because I'm already so guarded." I don't
Yes,
need to go
exactly, right? So
and have
yeah.
these internal relationship conflicts, so that's just
Mhm.
interesting. So in
Yeah.
your book, you mentioned that you had to do, like, a lot of research, and I don't know if that
Mhm.
was interviewing people, doing
Yes.
case studies. What was your process of
So I
writing this
did
book?
focus groups. I did focus groups with
Okay.
moms of, people who had raised like teenage children. And I asked them, I just kind of, I didn't even put all of the interview in the book because it was a lot. But the primary question that I put in the book, I put three questions or, three of the questions in the book. And one of them was, when have you not belonged? And what would you kind of tell yourself now, right? Or do you have a situation where your child did not belong and how did that feel like, right? And so everyone is sending me, their stories. And I remember a particular woman whose story is in that book now. the way she described the experience, I could almost like viscerally feel it, because you could just see that what that thing cuts deep, whatever it was that, had happened. And through my research, I found out that why it cut deep was because, like you said, she entered this space thinking we're all alike, right? We're all, homeschooling moms, so we should have the same orientation, forgetting that some people, even in that homeschooling society, want to be the queen bee, right? And they will do anything to kind of, like not destroy, but, if you think about the bee analogy, destroy a worker bee, right? In that sense. But you are coming in thinking, oh, we're all humming along and bees. So that happened to her. It was like a huge betrayal. And I remember her using words like, I would never allow anybody to hurt me that way again. It was so piercing. She kind of used these words that were what you call wounding words, like words that lets you know that the person was really wounded.
Yeah.
And that's why that's when I realized that a lack of belonging is like a wound. So we're trying to, salve it. We're trying to make it so that, that wound heals up or closes up, right? In that sense. So, yeah. And then, some other stories, but I did a lot of research too, right? In the belonging space. I remember using certain terms, just in my writing. And then when I started to do my research, I'm like, oh, you mean this thing existed? Like, I didn't even know it existed, but it was all terms, that they use in the belonging research space. So yeah, it took me about 2 years, 18 months, right, to kind of go from conception to publication or to publish.
I
So
love that.
I know my this be when we will now move to the publishing part of my work.
Yes. And you self-published, or did you go to one of
I
the
self-published.
Okay.
I self-published, and that was a very deliberate choice,
Mhm.
right? And I feel like I always find myself in these spaces of, you know, gatekeeping. I'll call it gatekeeping, right? Like people say it has to be this way. And every time I come into those spaces, I always think, who says it has to be this way? This is what I say in my mind. I don't say it out all the time. And so when I was writing this book, right, I really appreciated the fact that self-publishing has become what it is now. And it's so professional. It's not like what people would think before. You just put things together and put it on Amazon. Because I said to myself, if I don't want to wait for this message to get out in the world, like 18 months is already long enough. If I was going through traditional publishing, it would take me months to pitch, write, edit, probably 3-4 years. I didn't want that, right? I felt like this message was burning in my mind, right? And I needed to get it out. And obviously, I do have the skills. And so I did that, right? I kind of did that. So a lot of people have seen my book and they're like, they cannot even almost like believe that it's self-published, right? Because I went all the way professionally. I didn't like cut any corners, those kinds of things. So I'm very proud of the work. I'm going to tell you.
As you
Yeah.
should be. That's your baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
I know that when you're in academia, there's all kinds of like self-publishing assistants that just put out like textbooks and guidebooks and things like that. So I think it's refreshing to hear that even with some of
yeah.
those avenues available to you, that's not
Mhm.
available to others, you still went the
Yeah.
self-publishing route.
Yeah.
What was your
Yeah.
learning curve like in that? Any downfalls that you want to put out there that maybe somebody can avoid, a misstep that you made, or maybe your biggest success in the journey?
A misstep that I made. I'm telling you, this book was a whole lesson in of itself. Because a mistake that I made was when I finished setting up my files and all of that, I kind of uploaded it to Amazon and it was wonderful. Like when I looked through the preview, everything was fine. So then I ordered like author proofs. It came, and that was the weirdest thing because the hardback was perfect. But the paperback had all this, like I would say formatting errors, which were not from me. It was from their conversion. And I was like, this is weird. So, but then when I'm telling my friends, I'm like, I saw all this in the book. They're like, no, it probably work out. It will probably work out, right, in the final publishing because the hard copy, like I said, was perfect.
Mhm.
And then it got published.
No, that was it.
Sitting in my, and I'm sitting in my friend's house. Thankfully, the next day, she gets her copy because she ordered overnight. And I looked at this, you know, book, and I remember it was like my spirit left my body. You know how, as I would say in Africa, I'm like, what just happened here? I called them. I'm on the phone with them for hours, and they said, they were going to replace all the copies that had gone out, but I needed to call people. I said, how do I know how many people have bought this book? So now I'm going on my mailing list. I'm going to LinkedIn. I'm going to all my friends through my text messages to say, if you bought the book, please just ask for a refund because it's useless. Like they're destroying it. And then, then I said, what happened? And they said, oh, it was a PDF. I said, but the hardback was perfect. So the guy walked me through. He said, try this. And then I tried it and I ordered another proof and it was perfect. I'm like, whew. So that was, very embarrassing for me, I'll tell you. But you see, I said to myself, if I hadn't done the work of this book, I probably would not have survived that embarrassment. Like I would have been so ashamed. But I'm talking belonging here. It's
Yeah.
part of it is accepting your mistakes, accepting. Acceptance is a huge part of the
Yeah.
belonging
And you
journey.
went through the work
Just
of reaching out to
yeah,
people and getting them the right copy, which I know
fixing
they
the mistake. Yeah.
appreciated. And
Yeah.
I think that's a really big lesson learned to anyone. Like what you get as the author proof is what it's going to look like when people order it.
Yep.
So, and
Yeah.
it's
That
weird
is
because
exactly.
sometimes it's like every format almost needs its own PDF upload and formatting. And you would think, well, it's the same information because I went through kind of the same thing between like
Yeah.
what wound up on Kindle and what wound up in my soft
Mm,
paperback.
mhm.
It ended up
Co-
being two
Yeah.
different files just
Yeah.
to make it
Yeah.
fit. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a good one. So you are now, well, no, for about 13, 14 years now, you've been editing. So always in the process behind the scenes. So tell us a
Yes.
little bit about your editing work. Are there certain
Okay.
types of works that you look for, a specific genre that you work in?
Yes. So now I work mostly with nonfiction and, what I'll call religious spirituality because I have a lot of Christian authors. And I think that just comes from my background, right? In terms of, coming from Africa where there's a lot of Pentecostalism. So people come here, they're professionals, and they want to write things. So devotionals, books where you're talking about your spiritual journey, things like that. So I consider it all nonfiction. It's just that when you look at the BISAC categories, you have to put it under religion and spirituality. So, but I do nonfiction. But when I first started, I didn't do fiction at all. I don't want to shortchange people who come to me and they're fiction writers because I feel like I cannot handle that. I don't even know how to, put a story arc, right? I can look at the book and tell you if the story works for me. So I can act as a beta reader for a fiction person. But, nonfiction again is my expertise. And so I don't even talk about fiction at all. So I do nonfiction. And then for a long time, I actually did children's books. I've done about 40, 50 children's books. But now, as I begin to almost like, niche down, I want to leave that space. It's not because of anything. It's just I cannot have my hands in too many pies. I want to be able to, the ones that I'm doing, do it well. So it's just nonfiction. And even within nonfiction, it's just creative nonfiction, right? It's not like business or things like that. It's like you have a story to tell. You want to get it out into the world and we'll tell it, right? In a way that works for you. Yeah.
And what should people do to prepare their work to go to an editor? Because I think
Okay.
that's such a mystery to a lot of people, and that's such an intimidating part of the process. They don't know
Mm-hmm.
what to ask, how to vet someone, how to prepare their book to go. So, what are
Mm-hmm.
you looking for when something lands on your desk ready to be edited?
Okay, if it's not ready, I actually send it back. I tell them you're not ready, right? And part of being ready is making sure it's not your first draft. People make that mistake of saying, oh, I've written something, I'm going to send it to the editor. I tell them you have to read this work, you have to sit with it, you have to, maybe send it to your mom or something, send it to somebody who can take a look at it, and you get a little bit of feedback that way. Because if it came to me in its first draft, we're going to be doing developmental editing, which will cost you a lot of money, right? So I think this is where I would also explain that there are different types of editing. There's developmental, a person who helps you build up the book, build up the ideas, tie it together. Even though now sometimes those people are called book coaches, right? They will kind of help you conceptualize the idea and get it out, into manuscript form. And then line editing and copy editing, which is kind of my expertise, are the ones who look at the sentence structure, make sure everything is, well, and also check your facts, right? I can't tell you how many people have come to say, hey, you said Highway 55 in California, it's not there. You know what I mean? Just as an example, right?
Yes.
And it's like, oh, and I said, yeah, that's what we do. It's not just the grammar. You're making sure that whatever is in that book, is legal. Everything is fine, right? Because not that you take responsibility for it. The author just take responsibility for it. But I feel like if something comes to an editor's hands, then they need to be able to point those out. If the author accepts it, that's fine. If they don't, that's also, on them, right? And so after us, which is line copy editing, then you get the proofreaders, right? The proofreaders are the ones who read it after it's in manuscript form, right? After the book is ready, so to speak. You then send it to them. They'll kind of, make sure that there are no errors, and then it finally goes to print. So the copy editing is the part that people feel like, oh, I can do away with because they've worked with a book coach and they think they'll do the proofreading, but they're completely different skill sets, I say to people.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah. I can't tell you how many people have come to me and said, my book has been fully edited, this, that. I'm like, okay, what do you want me to do? They're like, take a look at it. So when I take a look at it and I give them the report, it's like shock. It's like, oh, I say, yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lot of work, and I think people don't understand that there may be different people that do the specific thing. So I love the way
Yes.
that you broke it down
Yeah.
because people have their niches too.
Mm-hmm.
So, some people say I do everything and I do it in stages, and some people say I only do this, and after me,
Mm-hmm.
send it to this person.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can
Yeah.
be quite an
Yeah.
extensive project. And what is normally your turnaround time? Because I always tell people to ask,
Yeah.
like, if you're on a
Mm-hmm.
deadline, people need to know
Yes.
that so they can backtrack. So,
Exactly.
the average 200-page book, what would be your normal turnaround time?
Oh, I normally give about 15 to 20 business days, right? Depending on how
Okay.
extensive the editing is. But now I now do the publishing arm as well, right? So I take it from, editing to book production. And
Okay.
so, the typesetting, the formatting, the layout, that takes a bit of time. But the editing doesn't take more than, 3 weeks or 4 weeks at the maximum. Again, depending on the level of editing that is needed, right, for the work, or um how, how many words, I would say, what the number of words for the manuscript is. So yeah.
And do you do the book cover part of it too, or they are coming to you with the book cover already?
I can do the book cover if they want. If they come with the book cover, I also give insight to that, right? In terms of what works, what doesn't work, what I've seen to work, right? Especially for nonfiction, because it's my specialty. I know, the size, all of that. We kind of talk about colors, color schemes, and all of that. But in all of this, and that's the beauty of self-publishing, I say, the author, I don't want to say the author has the last word, but they do, right? If they insist that they want the book that way, there's nothing I can do, right? I can only give you my professional advice, and then that's it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It took me a long time to get that message internalized for my own profession because you're like, "I know the way. Why aren't you listening to me?" And someone said, "Nadia, people pay you for your advice. It is not your business whether or not they take it." So move
Yes.
on with your life. And I'm like, "But I don't want them to hurt,"
I
you
know.
know?
It's hard, right? Because you're like, I want this to be perfect for you, but
Yeah.
they just this is what I want, and I want it that way. And I get it, because it's such a what's the
It's
word?
their baby.
It's their baby, and it's so personal. And I say to
Yeah.
people, the reason why I can be so dispassionate sometimes about this work is, even for my own work, is that I have spent almost 20 years in academia. if you're in this field, you're going to get edited. And you're going to get brutally edited, not just edited where you get some comments, you get things. So you almost like inure to it, you know? But the way that I reframe it, I tell myself every single time is, no matter how nasty the reviewer or the editor is, they're trying to get me to a better product, right? That's how I look at it. I said, at the end of this process, I'm going to get a much better manuscript than I submitted. And so for me, it's always that's my driving thing, because when I'm working with people and they're like, how are you so calm in responding? Because some of the reviews or the comments that come back can be really hurtful. And I'm like, it's okay, they'll get us to a final product. But if there are things I don't agree with, then I explain why I have it in there, right? So I've learned to be on the other side and have very respectful, I would say, back and forth, right, with the reviewers or the editors. And so that's what I try to do for my clients. And something that I do is I never go in and rewrite your work. I'll always just put suggestions and comments to the side, but if it's a grammar thing, then I'll do it. And by grammar I mean like spelling here and there,
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Punctuation, those
make
types
those
of things.
changes I
Yeah.
can. But if it's something that is I feel is structural, that will change maybe the tone or something, it's kind of, have you considered X? Perhaps think about the reader and how this might make them stumble, and then I'll give a suggestion, right? So that's why when I said 3 to 4 weeks, these are all the things that I do. I'm not just doing it and then sending it back. I'm doing it, I'll say, very thoughtfully, and then getting them to see almost like my reasoning, and then they decide if they want to keep it or not, right? So yeah.
Since you mentioned it, I'll just do a quick little couple of questions, because I have people sending me children's books and wanting guidance on children's books. And I know it's not going to be your niche moving forward, but do you have any tips or guidance for people who are wanting to do that? Because I know, just from a basic level, you're dealing with illustrators and they have to be great
Yes.
because it has to resonate
Yep.
with a child. You have
Mm-hmm.
sentence structure that has to be a certain way.
Yes.
Someone came to me and they wanted their book in the shape of a bus. I'm like, I have no idea where you would go. I'm like, I don't do children's books. But do you have a few tips that people might go to, or resources that people might
Mm-hmm.
use when they're thinking about going down that
Yeah.
avenue?
So if a person is writing children's books, they want to look into the Society of, I think, Children's Books Writers, SC. I'll find the name and then give it to you so you put it in the notes. There's a society that you kind of go. So that's where they have all the, I'll say, tidbits and things to look out for. But then with children's books, right, it's a whole, I would say, multiples of genres, right? You have like the baby board books. You have, books for, I would say, 3 to 7, and then 8 to 12, right? Before you then get into young adults. So the 3 to 7, right? Their word counts for all of this. You have 0 to 500, and then 0 to 1,000, or between 500 and 1,000. Anything more than that has gone into like, middle school,
You wrote
more.
a novel for a 3-year-old.
So that's the first thing I say to them, like the number of words, then when they're done, we kind of look at you. So you write the story, but you're also thinking about the illustration as you're writing it, because it's not just the illustrator who's going to, do all that work. You want to almost like conceptualize it. So when they come to me, it's always like a child may not be able to understand this word. I have like a huge thesaurus, that I have of words that you can switch out for kids. Again, I'm not at home. I could find that, the title, and then send it to you. But things like that tell you, the words to use for kids, because you're writing this and you're writing it almost like in your adult
Mhm.
mind. You then have to translate it for kids, right? So that happens. And then obviously the dialogue, right? So the dialogue, if it's the dialogue between characters in the book, I make sure everything is, I don't want to say perfect, but you're not making a mistake calling one thing here on one page and calling it another on another page, right? So I'm looking for all those uh, fine level things. And then I remember I had an author who came in, and the first editor who had gone through her work had, made all these foreign words in italics, and I said, you don't have to do that anymore. And that's kind of one of the things, right? You can use regular words for them, and then at the back you explain what those words are, because we're trying to get people to be comfortable, right, with other words in other language, because English is not the only language, right, in the world. And so things like that, I'm pointing it out to them. But mostly it's the number of words, right, that determines, I would say, the age
For you.
grade. So if you
Okay.
want to write for, younger kids, you can't go above 500 words. Even 500 words is a lot,
Yeah.
right? In that sense. So yeah.
Okay, I think those are great resources.
Mm.
Was there anything that you wanted me to ask or discuss that I missed?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's back to that threading to
Mhm.
say, no matter how different we are, right, we can still coexist, you know, um, peacefully, and we can all offer belonging to the people in our spaces. That's kind of how I think about it. So, yeah.
That's beautiful.
Mhm.
It's beautiful to internalize. Now we just have to go out and spread that.
And just, pass it along. Yeah. So, yep.
So, how can people get in touch with you to either book you for keynotes or bring your training into their school?
Yeah.
What are the best ways
So,
to reach out to you?
okay. So my website is www.otitoiwuchukwu.com. And for the editing, it's www.getfabediting.com. So through any of those, you can reach me. I'm on Instagram, on Facebook, not really on LinkedIn, but Instagram and Facebook, and Blue Sky. I kind of shut down my Twitter accounts in 2023 because I didn't think it was. I didn't the benefit was not. Uh, I couldn't see it anymore, right? The ROI from there. So I shut those down. And then my emails, right? So email will be editor@gfecpublishing.com. Yeah.
Okay,
Mm.
perfect. Well, thank you once again for
And also
gracing
this
our
one here.
stage.
There's
Oh,
an email
sorry.
here. No, I'm saying,
Oh,
and also email here. This is the Gmail. So if you wanted to go very professional, then you go to editor@gfecpublishing.com. But this will always get to me. This email will get to me too.
okay. The Fab Editor Online at
Yeah, yeah, at
gmail.com.
gmail.com. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Perfect. Just saying that for the people who might stream this, but we're on
Mhm.
YouTube as well.
Yeah,
Yay.
yeah.
So you can look for us in both places. But
Cool.
thank you for joining
Thank
in on Authors and
thank you.
Espresso today. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank
You
you
are just
very,
such a
very
wealth
much.
of information and
Yes.
passion. So
Yeah.
I'm really thrilled to have you here today.
Thank you so, so much.
You're
Yes.
welcome.
Yes.